When I look at the final day of 2026 Formula One testing in Barcelona, I don't see a leaderboard. I see a stress test. I see intent. A stress test of engines, of preparation, of how well teams actually understand this brand new era. Because behind closed doors, with almost no official coverage, Formula One just showed us more than it intended to. Quick note before we go deeper, we're about to hit 1,000 subscribers, and if you're here for real F1 insight, not noise, you're already in the right place. Consider joining us as we cross 1,000 subscribers. Let's get into it. This was never about predicting the championship. Barcelona was a shakedown, a systems check, an engine reliability trial disguised as a test. But if you know what to look for, how teams structured their programs, how hard they pushed, and who dared to push at all, then the final day tells us a lot. So let me walk you through everything we learned from the 2026 F1 testing in Barcelona. The 2026 regulations changed everything. No MGUH, much higher electrical deployment, active aerodynamics, lower downforce, new cooling demands, new energy management philosophy. This test wasn't about speed, it was about survival. And almost every team passed that test, which is important because reliability was the excuse for keeping this test private. Ironically, that secrecy became one of the biggest stories, and nowhere was curiosity higher than around the last team to show its car. The Aston Martin F1 team made everyone wait. They skipped the early days, they ran just 5 laps on day 4, and finally went properly on the final day. Fernando Alonso was in the car, Adrian Newey was in the garage. That image alone tells you how serious this project is. Visually, the AMR 26 is the most aggressive car here. Extreme rear suspension geometry. High rake, possibly the highest on the grid. Rear suspension acting almost like a beam wing. Minimal floor furniture. Radical aero platform. This is classic Newey philosophy. Force the airflow to work harder than the rules expect. From everything coming out of the paddock, Aston Martin did not push the engine, reduced straight-line power, focused on lap count, temperatures, integration. There were even reports of a self-imposed speed limit, an unusual rear light warning other cars, reason being, this car is likely overweight, far from its final aero package, still integrating Honda's new power unit, which means what we saw was the least dangerous version of the AMR 26. That's why Aston Martin remains the biggest unknown. Now let's talk about the team that did the exact opposite. The Mercedes F1 team maximized Barcelona better than anyone. Let's talk numbers. 2,328 kilometers completed, equivalent to almost half a test more than Ferrari. The only team that would have run more, if not for red flags caused by others. Mercedes themselves admitted, we lost more time to other teams' problems than our own. That's confidence. Car feels better than the simulator. Power delivery smoother despite higher electric contribution. No MGUH, but no drivability shock either. George Russell even said trackside, these cars look faster on the straight than anything I've seen before. But let's add context. Mercedes also looked brilliant in early 2022 testing, and that era humbled them. So yes, Mercedes are the early benchmark, but this is still only week 1 of understanding, because the fastest lap of the entire test did not belong to Mercedes. This is where we correct the record properly. Lewis Hamilton set the fastest lap of the entire Barcelona test, 1:16.3 Friday. That matters, not because it makes Ferrari favorites, but because of how it happened. Let's look at Ferrari's week in numbers. Over 2,000 kilometers completed, second highest mileage overall. Very few interruptions. SF26 labeled internally as Spec A. Much more development still to come. Even before Hamilton's late flyer, Charles Leclerc had already crept closer to Mercedes' benchmark. This wasn't a glory run out of nowhere. Hamilton said this preseason already feels better than 2025. Yes, he had a couple of spins, but that's part of learning these cars. Ferrari's strength here wasn't speed, it was execution. Quiet, clean, efficient. That's why Ferrari were the sleeper hit of Barcelona. Now let's talk about the biggest surprise. According to Mercedes themselves, the Red Bull Ford engine entered this test with skepticism. It left with respect. George Russell openly praised it. Max Verstappen said it hit the ground running. For a brand new engine program, that's massive. Early running went smoothly. Then Isaac Hadjar's crash caused delays. Spares were flown from Milton Keynes. Red Bull returned and used all 3 days. Max Verstappen completed 118 laps on Friday alone. But the concern, yes, overheating. Cooling had to be conservative. Tight packaging created challenges, but this is manageable. The Racing Bulls logged 350 plus laps, giving Red Bull huge data from the B team. For a first outing, this was a win. Not every champion had a smooth week though. The reigning champions, McLaren F1 team, had a middling test. Slow start, fuel system issue, lost valuable early mileage. They recovered on Friday with 162 combined laps, but overall, average mileage, average disruption. And Lando Norris nailed it with this comment: slower in corners, faster in acceleration, more complicated. That's not panic, that's reality. These cars demand driver input again. McLaren are adapting, but they weren't ahead of the curve here. Let's look at Alpine and Williams. Two teams deserve serious attention. Alpine terrible in 2025, all in on 2026. They rebounded strongly, 164 laps on the final day. Visible aero experimentation, internal expectation, points every race. David Sanchez and the technical group are aiming high. Williams didn't run at all in Barcelona, and yet they've committed everything to 2026. Crash tests passed, Bahrain confirmed. Don't confuse absence with failure. Audi's first F1 test was rough, multiple red flags, significant garage time, but 60% of weekly mileage on the final day. Mattia Binotto joked, "This is the longest to-do list I've ever seen." That's honesty. And Cadillac? Low mileage, low pace, but that was expected. This was problem-solving mode. As Valtteri Bottas said, now we start setting up the car. So the million-dollar question is what these 2026 cars feel like. This might be the most exciting takeaway. Drivers agree. Less downforce, more sliding, more wheel spin, much stronger acceleration. Hamilton called them more enjoyable, easier to catch. Russell said they look insanely fast on the straight, and the sound feels better, sharper, more aggressive. Barcelona didn't give us a pecking order, but it gave us clarity. Mercedes are prepared. Ferrari are efficient. Red Bull are ahead of schedule. McLaren are adapting. Aston Martin are dangerous later. The engines survived. The cars came alive. The reset worked. Bahrain is next, and that's where the real season begins. If this breakdown helped you see testing differently, consider joining us as we cross 1,000 subscribers. This channel is about understanding Formula One, not reacting to it. Bahrain is coming, and this is just the beginning. I appreciate every single one of you who's been part of this journey.